my life's still engrossed in politics. But I suppose what's different is I travel a hell of a lot more, and I've got a lot more attention than I did beforehand. But other than that, I think we're managing to keep things in a steady balance. Political hero's not the right word. I think I would say the people who I look up to are actually mostly Tories, for the fact that there's quite a few, well, I say quite a few, there's a handful of Conservatives that I really like debating with. I've said before, you know, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Edward Lee's another good one. I disagree with them on 99% everything, but the fact that they can articulate an argument, they can tell you why they believe something. Quite often it just comes down to selfishness, but I would much rather take that kind of honesty and that intellectual rigour over soggy answers, you know, for folk that I agree with. So I think that's actually quite surprised me, that it's mostly Conservatives that I'm impressed by. I do like Dennis Skinner, but he's good. He's always entertaining. I think that when we first arrived, you know, the Daily Mail and all that loved this idea that all these Scottish MPs are going down there to break these rules. But the truth is, any rules we broke, it was because we didn't know they were rules, because they're that ludicrous. Perfect example is clapping. You know, every other, you know, democratic parliament almost everywhere in the world uses clapping, but instead we have to shake bits of paper and stuff. So that's strange, but I think in itself, voting for me is the most infuriating thing, because the way it works is you get the chamber and there's two lobbies either side, and you've probably seen it where the speaker goes all the ayes or the noes, and all these wee bells start ringing, and they're literal bells in the walls of Parliament, and you've got 8 minutes to get into one of the lobbies, and if you physically haven't got a bit of your body in one of those lobbies at the end of the 8th minute, the doors are shut and you can't vote. But then once you're in the lobby, it takes about another 10-15 minutes for the queues to die down, because what they've got is 3 pillars, where you've got somebody sitting there with a big bit of paper with all the names on it, and you have to go through one by one, and they've literally got a big black marker and they just go, right, Mary Black, there you go. And the doors are put at 45-degree angles, so you can only go out one at a time. So votes, you know, one vote takes 25 minutes. So if you've got a bill where there's 4 votes, that's what, an hour that we're being paid literally to stand about a corridor. You know, and when you think in like the Scottish Parliament, for example, they press a button, it's done in 5 minutes. So that infuriates me. It's such a waste of time. So I suppose that's the worst one. And I think that because I make a point of coming home every week, you come back to normality. So then when you go back down again, it just reminds you how ludicrous it all is. So if anything, I suppose, God, it sounds cheesy, but coming home kind of inspires me to go back and go, this is nonsense, guys. But we'll see how far we get, because they finally agreed to modernise a little bit, and their idea of modernising is now, instead of having a bit of paper and a black marker, it's now an iPad that they click on. But to be honest, that actually makes it longer, because the bally things don't work half the time. But that's what infuriates me. Well, for me, the whole WASPI thing started because that stands for Women Against State Pension Age Inequality. So the very first woman who actually came to my first surgery was a WASPI woman, but she didn't know it, and neither did I at the time. Because basically what the whole WASPI campaign is about is the fact that there's a group of women born in the 1950s who are the ones predominantly affected by this. Because what happened was, in 1995, guys retired at 63, I think, and women retired at 60, then the age went up for men. So what the 95 Act said was, we're going to equalise the age, so we're going to make it that women retire the same time as men. But also there was a commission at the time, I can't remember what it's called, but they said that any time you make any changes to pensions, you have to give people 15 years notice, so that they can, you know, make appropriate plans or change, or, you know, save more or whatever. So technically speaking, the 1995 Act did that, because it was 15 years before it started to kick in. But the problem was, the government never notified anyone of this. It wasn't broadcast anywhere, no letters were sent out whatsoever. So these changes were happening and people were blissfully unaware over these 15 years. But where the problem really starts is that in 2011, the Tory and Lib Dem coalition, they decided to take the last part of the 1995 timetable, and instead of leaving it, a couple of years, they decided to rush everything into 18 months. So what you found was women were, getting their pension statement and they were expecting to retire at 60, but discovering that they have to wait till they're 66, and they were given no warning about this. So then, of course, we started to realise this is clearly a problem everywhere. So we started to do some digging, and through a freedom of information, we discovered that the government only started sending out letters, I believe, in 2009. And then even in saying that, the letters were incredibly inaccurate. I had one woman coming in who got a letter from DWP saying that she was going to retire in 3 weeks' time, and then she got another letter 2 weeks later saying, no, you need to wait another 4 years. So it's just ludicrous stuff. But now what makes matters worse is that the government's refusing to budge. So you've got all of these women who, you need to remember, grew up in an unequal society. They literally weren't allowed private pensions or workplace pensions. So the state pension's all they've got, and it's been taken away from them at the last moment. So what we've been doing is trying to raise awareness about this, and having multiple debates about it. And the government keeps saying, right, well, what's your answer? What's your answer? And they were saying that any sort of easing of the timetable would cost, they said, £30 billion. And we didn't believe that. So myself and Ian Blackford, who are the pensions team down at Westminster, we decided to use our money to fund a report. And this guy, who's Howard, his name is, he's a whiz with numbers, he dug away at it, and he discovered that if we were to get rid of the 2011 Act, slow it right back down, give women breathing space, allow people time to plan, it would only cost £8 billion. And just to put that in perspective, the government have only a couple of weeks ago said that they want to do up the House of Commons for £7 billion. So we can't afford to pay pensions, but we can't afford to do that. But on top of that, because everybody pays national insurance, so this national insurance fund, at the end of this financial year, it's got a surplus of £26.3 billion. So the idea that we can't afford £8 billion spread across 5 years is just nonsense. And in actual fact, in 2017-18, the surplus is expected to rise to £30.7 billion. So this idea we don't have money is, horrendous and just rubbish. So we're on recess just now, but when we go back, myself and Ian are trying just now to get another debate to say, right, you told us to go away and find a way to do it. There's your answer. Do it. So hopefully we'll get somewhere with it, but that's WASPy in a nutshell. So the private members' bills are basically what happens is once a year there is, in one of those voting lobbies I mentioned earlier, there's a big book and it's just got all these numbers, right up to 650 I think, and you just put your name beside it, and basically they just put the numbers in a hat, pull out these numbers and subsequently the names, and basically if you're in the top 6 or 7, you get a free pop at making a law. It's crazy. So in my first year I managed to get one. There's folk who've been in Parliament for 42 years and have never managed it, but I got lucky. So when we spoke to the clerks about it, they said you can use your private member's bill one of two ways. You can either use it to raise awareness of an issue but know that you're never going to get anywhere with it, because I think there was one a couple of years back to get rid of the bedroom tax. So of course that's never going to pass, the government won't let it happen, but you can get some publicity out of it. Or what you can do is work really hard and actually try and get something that the government will accept. So I thought, given the fact that these things are very rare, I've got another 4 years to shout about things, so I'll try and do something practical. And as many people will be aware, one of the big problems in Paisley in particular, but throughout the constituency, is sanctions, and how sanctions are dished out, and what reasons they're dished out for. And one of the things, because I'm part of the Work and Pensions Committee, we do lots of visits to other constituencies, and everywhere that I've been where the sanctions regime, I don't like saying it works because I'm totally against sanctions, but where it's not as brutal as it is in some parts of the constituency, it's purely because of potluck. It's because the person they've got is really understanding, really helpful, is in a good mood, you know. So what the government's basically done is they've said that work coaches deciding whether to sanction someone, they have to look at certain guidelines, but the problem with guidelines is they're not rules, you can interpret them as you like. So it's really potluck as to what job centre you get, what mood the person's in, what their nature is, things like that. So basically what my private member's bill is saying is trying to get sort of a code of conduct of sorts where it's explicitly listed out when sanctions should not apply. So like for instance, if you've got a single mum who doesn't turn up to a job interview at 8:45 in the morning, well, you can look at this code of conduct and go, right, single mum, right, clearly she's getting the veins to school, right, doesn't apply, you know, and have these set things. Because in fact a couple of weeks ago we had a constituent who is terminally ill, he's got 3 months to live, and his mum's been arguing with the job centre on his behalf because he's in intensive care just now, and they phoned up to tell him that he's been sanctioned for not turning up to a work interview. Now surely if you had something as simple as a code of conduct saying, right, you're in intensive care, doesn't apply, it could save a lot of heartache. So for me this is just, it's a chance to do something that's logical, that's not too you know, it's not too controversial, it's just common sense. I would love to get rid of the sanctions regime, but I recognise it's not going to happen, so if I can just do this small thing that will try and alleviate some of the pain, then I think that'll be a private member's bill well spent. So just now we're working away at the wording of it, but I'm trying to gather support from Conservatives and Labour MPs and things, because a couple of Tories have actually said that they'll support it, but I need more than a couple.
What if you need, and just my voice will pop you, right? How do you go about getting support?
Right. And the way in which you get support from MPs is really just by lobbying them, sitting with them and trying to convince them. Because I think, especially with myself, quite often Conservative MPs in particular immediately think I'm there for a battle. You know, I'm there just to get told right in. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I am, but this is a time when I'm not. I'm genuinely looking for, you know, any constructive criticisms. I'm happy to compromise on things here and there. So that's how I've been doing it. You just go around and talk to folk and try and explain to them that, because quite often there's people who say, but it's fine in my constituency, and I go, that's because you're lucky. It's no fine here, it's not fine there, it's not fine there. So let's try and get some consistency throughout job centres everywhere, which a lot of them can't fault the logic in. So slowly getting there, but I think folk are sceptical, but we're getting there. I think when it comes to my hopes and fears post-Brexit, there are far more fears than there are hopes, if I'm honest. Obviously Theresa May's now Prime Minister, and that's not a good thing. I think Theresa May's a lot more cutthroat than David Cameron was. In some respects he's more right-wing than Cameron was, so I'm quite nervous about what she's going to come out with, because I know how ruthless she can be. I think as well, the worrying thing in general about Brexit is just the perceived and actual rise in xenophobia and hatred and real ugly bigotry. And I hate it when people call it, you know, like UKIP nationalists and stuff, because it's no nationalism, it's racism. So stop calling it anything other than that. Keep reminding folk that no, this is just, it's just a horrible, horrible atmosphere. Some places much worse than others. So I think that's really concerning. How it's almost as though being racist has suddenly become slightly more acceptable. It's almost been legitimised a little. So I think that there's a lot of aspects about Britain just now that are very, very ugly. I also have fears about what our stance in the rest of the world will be, because I know how I look at the UK, so I can only imagine how, you know, Germany and all these other countries must look at the UK. You know, we seem to march about the world as though we're this massive influence when we forget that we're this size. We've not actually got an awful lot to be, you know, bragging about in terms of economics compared to some other places. So that's what my real concern is. I think the only hope I've got from this is, I suppose, one where there is a rise in racism and things like that, there's also been a rise in people standing up and saying that's not okay. So I've actually been very heartened by that, particularly, I have to say, in this constituency, but even just throughout Scotland just now. Even like that, if I'm in the pub or something, there's been a couple of occasions where I've heard folk hitting out with stuff and get dug up by either bar staff or folk beside them or whatever. So I suppose there's some hope there. My big hope though is that people will suddenly wake up to why so many people are in support of independence. Not because we're in a love affair with the SNP, not because we all want to have saltires tattooed on us, nothing like that. It's about practical change. It's about recognising that so long as we're part of this UK, we're part of this ugly structure, this out-of-date, horrible model, that our voice really doesn't matter. And I think that Theresa May and Brexit shows exactly that. You've got an entire country that voted overwhelmingly to stay within the European Union, and whether you're for or against the EU, you can't ignore that. And yet that's just been totally cast to one side. It's no, we're leaving, that's it. And, you know, England voted to leave, so you're coming with us. So hopefully it's going to wake a good few folk up to see that this ugly path that we're going down isn't, you know, it's not definite. We can change it. All we have to do is have a bit of confidence in ourselves and show that we can do things differently. So I'm hoping for Indy F2 at some point, but we'll wait and see. But as I say, it's depressing to say that I do genuinely have more fears than I do hopes just now. But I'll hang on to the hopes for dear life. In terms of what ambitions we have for the area and things, I think that the Paisley 2021 bid is actually a real big positive. I'm sure Jean Cameron won't mind me saying that when I first heard about it, I was terrified that it was just going to get a slagging, you know, because I can only imagine what I would have said, you know, if I was 14 and somebody went City of Culture, is that way okay, you know, doing that kind of patter. But I've actually been thankfully proven wrong with that. Even on the Facebook page, talking to folk in the street, people are right into it. It's, I know, too right, we have got an awful lot of stuff, which is something that I've not seen in Paisley in a long time. So I think that you can, it's palpable, the sort of the confidence and buzz that the campaigns bring into, certainly to the town and further beyond. So actually we did an event, myself and Gavin Newlands down at Westminster. We were inviting all these, you know, chief execs and stuff, and just basically try to big up Paisley to them. We want to win. And the big thing I says to them was, well, I'm going to talk personally and say I've seen such a change in my hometown. So if that is the amount of good that a bid alone can bring, just imagine what amount of good winning it would bring. And I have to say that the amount of interest from, you know, said chief execs and stuff in Paisley is something that I don't think we've had for quite a while. So I think the bids are a really, really healthy thing, and the more that we can punt the good that we have, whether that's the sense of humour, whether it's the the history or the abbey or whatever it is, even the art actually, because the lines and all that, there's one just outside the office, cracking. So I think the more we can talk about that and the more we can big up Paisley, the better it'll be for the whole constituency. And I think that we're in with a definite good shout.